Family disputes can make us feel isolated and vulnerable. Maybe you're going through a divorce or a legal dispute about your kids. Perhaps you've spent hours on Google or have even posted anonymously on Facebook to see what others have to say. But are you getting the actual information and support that you're looking for? Our podcast, Legal Lounge, aims to dispel misinformation and downright bad legal information to empower anyone with questions about their family, their children, their finances, their marriage, and the law. As a team focused exclusively on family law matters, we aim to help listeners not only with the information they need, but also with the hope that their situation has a solution. Short disclaimer, please note this podcast is for educational purposes only, and the information should not be relied upon as legal advice or for legal purposes. Welcome back to Season 2 of The Legal Lounge. Today, I'm excited to sit next to one of my friends and fellow attorneys at Modern Legal, Deb Dilman. Today, we're talking about a very important subject because when we sit across from our prospective clients, we get the question often of, I don't know if we have enough finances to divorce, we're still married. What are some things that we can do if we don't think we can even afford a divorce?
Yeah, that's such an interesting question, Theresa, and thank you for having me today. As your friend and colleague, I'm excited to do this. So it's interesting, clients get confused about what is necessary to get a divorce, obtain a divorce in North Carolina, versus how can I separate and make ends meet financially. And the divorce in North Carolina is considered non-contested. Mm-hmm. So you can proceed with a divorce whether you have money or whether you don't have money. Mm-hmm. The process for everything else, the financial aspect, is different and separate from the actual divorce process. So while it can be difficult if you don't have a lot of money and trying to decide what to do, if you have a job or you have access to some funds to be able to live out on your own, you can separate and uncouple from that spouse and proceed with the divorce and then deal with the financial stuff at a point when you're ready to do that.
Yeah, that's a great point. I think in a lot of states, especially if someone had a cousin or a family member get divorced in another state, I hear it all the time. Well, my brother got divorced in Jersey or my aunt got divorced in Florida. I'm like, well, we're in North Carolina. Laws are a little different. And specifically in North Carolina, as you point out, the divorce process is a separate process from addressing all the financial pieces. Go one step further. Yeah, we just need the both parties to separate. North Carolina Court of Appeals defines that as each spouse residing under separate roofs for at least a year, and then you can move forward with what we could consider more of a paperwork process. And as attorneys, we push the paperwork through the court. In a couple months, generally speaking, you'll get divorced, and that's just changing your status from married to single. On the flip side, as you were noting, that financial piece, and I think some people feel like they need to stay in the house and can never get divorced or never pursue any form of legal relief because there's not enough money around.
Yeah, that's a tough one. And in consultations, I spend time with clients talking to them about, okay, what things can you do, right, to make yourself more independent, right? So empower, take back that individual piece of you that you may have lost while you were married. But if you didn't have money coming into the marriage, then you've known throughout the marriage and you're not going to have money coming out of the marriage. But you can still look to separate and figure out what it is that you can do. And people get hung up in the fear, right? The fear is very, very real. The fear of the person who doesn't have money, maybe she or he hasn't been working for a while or not working at capacity because they've been maybe the person raising the kids. So, where can that change? What can I do for that? But you have to weigh that financial freedom against your emotional freedom from getting out of a relationship that's no longer working for you as a husband and wife. And it is sort of a weird cost-benefit analysis. Like, do you want to stay in this marriage miserable because you don't think you have the ability to go out on your own and make a living that will support yourself? Or are you willing to take that risk with an attorney's help, right? Because we can help you do that. But are you willing to take that risk, that leap of faith to give you the freedom? And I guarantee you, if you're willing to take that risk, you'll sleep well that first night you're in that new place, even if you don't have a box spring.
Yeah. Yeah, agreed. And it's more of an inflatable mattress. Yep.
Exactly.
I've had to
Sleeping
talk to
bag.
clients about finding just something. And I know starting over is never easy. I think, especially if you've had children, especially if you've tried a career or you went to school but then quit school or your job for the marital relationship and certain marital goals, such as having children, it can be very daunting to think about, okay, I'm going to have to start from scratch again. And yeah, you want to weigh that against, are you in a healthy marriage? Because to your point, like you said, that emotional versus financial situation, those are things you want to take into consideration about what do you want your future to be? What life do you want to live? What example, if you have children, do you want to set for your children? And I see it a lot, especially in unhealthy relationships or even domestic violence relationships where a lot of abused spouses feel like they need to stay in the relationship for the financial security of the marriage. And my counter to that is what is actually necessary, and I would posit that your safety is probably what is actually necessary.
Your emotional and your physical safety.
Yes.
It's both. And we spend a lot of time talking about physical safety, but most times the emotional safety is what's hiding in the background, right?
Yes.
You're so scared to make a move because you've never had to do that before.
Yeah.
And you can plan. Right? You can say, all right, I know I want to separate from my spouse, but I know I can't do it this month. I might not be able to do it next month. But there are people in and around your community, our community, especially in Charlotte, that work with folks on dealing with vocations, dealing with building a good resume that's going to pass through the scan process because it's so different than it was 10, 15 years ago. And then there's, building your strengths. There's lots of people in this community that can help you with those things. And we at Modern Legal, we talk to you about that. We talk to you about planning. We recognize that one of the hardest steps is coming into an attorney's office to talk about these things. Yeah. But that doesn't mean that we're going to say to you, you need to move out tomorrow. I mean, maybe circumstances would dictate that if you really are in fear of harm's way for you or your children. But typically, we take it as slow as you take it.
Yeah,
right?
One step at a time.
Exactly, just a step at a time.
Deb, I'm so glad you brought attention to that situation because I feel sometimes that people will schedule consultation and they're like, oh, okay, well, a lawsuit will be filed the very next day. And it's like, whoa. No. Especially in family law, we try to avoid the lawsuit if at all necessary. Right. And sometimes that's not what's best for the family in the situation. And I do think generally the public understands that you can't move forward with a divorce, specifically in North Carolina while you're still residing together, because a lot of people know about the 1 year of separation. But I think what a lot of people don't realize is we can actually start addressing the financial piece, let's set up a plan for parties to live separately, even before you separate. Right. And I very much prefer a prospective client coming in for a consultation as soon as they have the thought about separation or divorce from their spouse. And the reason why is not only does that client get the information they need to kind of see where things could lead, but go one step further, maybe discussions could be had while parties are still amicable. Maybe they've already had some rough patches in their marriage. They've already had some tears. They've already had some rough discussions. And those rough discussions could also address some of the things that we will bring a prospective client's attention to during the consultation. And it's so much more important to have those discussions, I would argue, before the date of separation versus after, when someone has already started slinging mud and people are not thinking rationally but very emotionally at that point.
Right. That's such a good point.
Building relationships is a natural part of life. But how does the law affect those relationships? Do you want to marry your significant other, but have cold feet from the many divorce horror stories out there? Are you preparing for a custody battle against your ex? That is where Modern Legal comes in. We offer education and knowledge about the law when it affects the relationships near and dear to your heart. To learn more about how family law affects your family, book a consultation with an attorney of our Modern Legal team by visiting our website, emailing us, or calling us at 704-286-6302. Check out the information about Modern Legal services at modernlegal.com. nc.com.
You could do it either way, right? You can, enter into some sort of agreement before you separate, that says you're contemplating and the separation will occur within whatever, 2 months, a month, 2 weeks, and then actually address in that agreement what the finances are going to look like. You can also do a temporary agreement that says, in the interim, until we resolve the big picture, this is what we're going to do. Maybe it's maintaining the status quo, whatever that is, so that everybody has an understanding of it. But you don't have to first be separated before you can start having those discussions. And I talk to prospective clients about the continuum, right? The options that you have. If you're civil with one another, you don't have to be amicable necessarily, but if you can have a civil conversation, sit down at that kitchen table and talk about these things.
Yeah.
That doesn't mean they're easy to talk about, but that's the first step. The more you can narrow things down and resolve things between the two of you, the better your family will be at the other side of this when you are divorced, because you have been engaged in the process. You've not waited for someone to tell you what to do. Unlike protracted litigation, that someone is telling you, a judge in a black robe is going to tell you exactly what's going to happen with everything.
Yep.
It's going to take 12 to 18 months for that to happen. In the meantime, you guys are gloves on and you're fighting with one another because you're paying a lot of money to do that. It's not easy. It's never easy, but we can walk you through the process, and you will see that you do have the power to talk to your spouse about doing some of these things and resolving some of these things.
Yeah, and I think a good point that you're bringing attention to is let's try to amicably resolve as much as possible, because guess what? I'm going to tell the listeners, that's exactly what a judge is going to want you to do. If you're on the precipice of trial, we call it the doorsteps of court and trial, the judge is going to say, hey, can you go back outside and try to resolve these things? And trust you me, it's a lot cheaper. It's a lot more timely. It's a lot better emotionally, if you will, overall, that you have these discussions even before you separate, rather than at the doorsteps of the courtroom.
Well, yeah, and our statutes recognize that, right? Because for certain parts of the separation and the issues that need to be resolved, it's the statute mandate, the law mandates that you try to resolve it before you go to court.
Yeah.
So if the law is going to mandate you have to do that anyway, why allow yourself to get to that point? Just voluntarily try to resolve it amicably, or as amicable as possible, outside of court when you're in control.
And it starts
You
at
make
that kitchen table.
It starts at that kitchen table,
Yeah.
Donna.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Darn it. And I would also add, it's really important, if an agreement is made at that kitchen table, to bring it to an attorney. Because I have seen as well that parties are like, oh, well, we had this verbal agreement or this paper napkin agreement, if you will. And things are okay for a couple of weeks, a couple of months, especially when it involves children. And then suddenly something happens that no one would have thought was even a big deal. I don't know, there was a winning a soccer game or a loss at a soccer game, or someone gets a new significant other, or someone's in-law is suddenly insulted about something that happened on a holiday afternoon. And if you bring in an attorney right after you've had that kitchen table conversation, that attorney can try to formalize whatever has been agreed upon, even if you haven't resolved everything.
Correct. Yep, absolutely. And I will take that one step further. So the napkin, the verbal agreement, those are hard and they should be codified, and you should talk to an attorney about that. But also there are lots of templates online, and while those templates are great, they're generic,
Yes.
right? They're not specific to North Carolina law. So even if you want to try to resolve something on your own by a template, you should have that reviewed by a North Carolina attorney, someone licensed here, to make sure that you understand what you're entering into, and to make sure you're not entering into something in an agreement that's contrary to what North Carolina law is.
Oh my goodness. I feel like that's coming from pent-up anger when you see these agreements that were signed and you're like, oh no, there's not much I can do unless the parties agree to re-sign things. But yeah, to your point, if someone has signed something that is not necessarily in line with North Carolina law, and it's not something in line with what we see judges doing and parties doing in their families, you've just signed something that could possibly negatively impact you and your children's situation for years to come.
Yeah, absolutely. Forever.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Yep. Such good points.
And that signature is a lot more important and powerful than people realize.
Yeah.
So be careful signing anything.
Yeah. Yeah. Don't sign it until you're certain that this is what you want to sign.
Yeah.
And you probably should talk to an attorney. It'll
Yeah.
be the best money you can spend. And if you don't have it, your community can probably help you.
Yes.
Right? Your church can probably help you. There are other organizations in town that may be able to help you, get the funds together to at least have a conversation with an attorney who knows what she's talking about.
Yeah. Agreed. And going further into that hypothetical is, and I've seen this a lot on like the Facebook channels and the groups, where parties believe, there's just not enough money to go around. And if there's not much money to go around now, trust me, there won't be much money to go around later.
That's right.
So I understand that that's a consideration about even separating. But if you want to do something about it, maybe it's starting to do something about it now.
Correct.
Because, trying to stay in the same situation but expecting a different result, that's what's not gonna work out, right?
That's exactly right.
And so what I tell clients, or prospective clients, I should say, if there's not much money to go around, then theoretically the conversation should be simpler. We should be able to, before you even separate, because you don't have to live in separate apartments or houses just yet. We can talk about it before you even separate.
That's right.
Let's figure out, okay, there's 2 kids, there's one income into the household. How can we get you from this chapter to the next chapter? It's not going to be easy. It'll take time, but there are ways. No one should ever feel trapped in an unhealthy marriage.
Yeah, that's so true. And I'll tell prospective clients also when they're meeting with me, I'm like, look, I'm in business to make money too, right? Mm-hmm. So sure, I'll take your money, because I have bills I need to pay as well. However, I recognize that you don't have a lot of money. So why would you want to throw all your money at me? Mm-hmm. Talk to him or her and see what you can narrow to try and get some of these issues resolved. And that'll help you in the long run if you do have to hire an attorney, because you're not hiring an attorney to deal with everything. It's just little parts of what you're addressing that need to be taken care of.
And those parts, just for the listener, especially if they've never gone through a divorce or talked with a family law attorney, really do draw down to 3 main subject areas. I like to say, let's not talk about the divorce word or the D word, just because you do have to wait for that year of separation here in North Carolina. But it generally has to do with children. Do you have children? Do they have financial needs? Of course they do, but trying to figure out what those are. The second is property and debts. What happens to certain assets if you have assets? So if you're renting a car and renting an apartment, generally that means you probably don't have many assets. That's very different if you have a multitude of different real properties, cars, and investment accounts or retirement accounts. And then finally, the third topic is spousal support. Is there a financial obligation and need between a dependent and a supporting spouse? Right. Arguably, everyone's dependent in a marriage, right? Because you have a certain financial circumstance when 2 parties are residing together, and you can't just, by the magic wave of a wand, duplicate income.
Right.
But the way that the courts in North Carolina look at it, it's more so, okay, has someone been not working for a number of years? Maybe they don't have a high school diploma, college education, or beyond, and they've been a stay-at-home spouse or stay-at-home parent for a number of years. And that is compared to the other spouse being a financial provider for a number of years, making a relatively good income such that their needs are not only provided for with their financial resources, but then they have basically extra money to then help cover the financial need of the dependent spouse. So, and I've seen this where, one spouse may be dependent on another spouse, but if the other spouse is only making $40,000, $50,000 a year, there may not be actual dependency in a courtroom for spousal support purposes. Right. So those are all considerations that come into play, but it really is spousal support, children, property and debts.
Yeah, that's such a great point. And when you look at those 3 things, a lot of prospective clients come into my office and they want the house. Mm-hmm. And I think that's great if you want the house. My next question is typically, okay, can you afford the house? Yeah. Well, I don't know. I'm like, okay, well, we need to figure that out, because the last thing you want to have happen is your main, you don't want your main goal to be staying in that house. You get that house and now you're married to that house, right? Because you can't afford to do anything else, because it's not just the mortgage. It's the upkeep. It's the upkeep inside the house, outside of the house. It's maybe HOA dues. It's property taxes. It's a lot more than just the mortgage. So I do talk to clients about that as well. Sure, you may or may not get some spousal support in Charlotte if if the other person is only making $60,000, $70,000 and there's at least one kid, if not more, you're probably not getting spousal support.
Yeah.
Because you just can't live comfortably in Charlotte on that kind of money.
Yeah.
Other cities, maybe.
Yeah.
But here in Charlotte, no. And so if you're only earning $40,000 a year and you want this house, you need to be doing your budget
Yeah.
so that you can figure out whether or not you can not only afford it, but afford it and still have a life outside of that house.
Yeah.
Going out to dinner once a month, twice a month, going to, I don't know, play pickleball, whatever.
Yeah.
But something so that you're not just going to work and paying your bills.
Yeah. And it's so true that you bring that up. I get it. A lot of people invest a lot of time and become emotionally connected to all the memories.
House.
Yeah, and the memories made in a house. I get it. I do. I truly do. But to your point, I mean, you said very eloquently all of the financial burdens that are taken on when you have a house on your own. One thing I would add is the emotional burden.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, you have a lot of memories in this house, but are all those memories the good memories that you want to be reminded of? Did you ever have a fight with your spouse in that house? Were there any other issues that arose that, may not necessarily intrigue joy or happiness in your situation in that house? And that's something to think through. And it could be, I want the house on principle. Maybe the other spouse cheated. Maybe the other spouse is the one who wants the divorce and you don't want the divorce. I get it. At the end of the day, though, when we're talking about separation divorce, we're talking about ending a chapter. And if that house has been in that former chapter, it's a really hard pill to swallow. But it could be that the next chapter is demarcated by a separate residence or a different residence.
Right. Yeah, and you didn't ask me here today to talk about this specifically, but what I'm hearing from our mental health professional friends in the community, it used to be, a lot of people, prospective clients would say, I want the house because my kids, that's all my kids know, right? And the mental health community is looking at this a little differently now. They're like, it's hard for kids to come back to the house they grew up in with two parents to only having one parent there now. So there is it's not, I wouldn't call it a trend, but there have been some more recent discussions with mental health professionals about whether or not it just sort of makes sense to get rid of the house altogether.
Yeah.
So that the kids then are enjoying each parent in a separate house that they can't connect with the other parent in some way. So it's just kind of interesting.
Yeah.
I don't know financially whether that's a good or a bad idea, but it's one more. If you've got a prospective client that you're not quite sure, like you get that your gut check says, I'm not sure this person can really afford this house, then maybe that's the discussion you can have as well about whether or not, your kids might be better suited, just starting over completely somewhere else as well.
Yeah. And there is something to be said when, your world is in chaos and so many pieces are moving, and then suddenly you're having to think about, oh, I have to move now.
Right.
Oh my goodness, I'm going to be, sleeping in a different bedroom. There's going to be so many changes. I don't know if I can emotionally, let alone financially, take in all these changes.
Yeah.
But mental health wise, what I've seen, and granted, these are very specific examples, so I'm not going to say that this would apply to everyone.
Right.
But what I have seen is a number of my clients, once they have made that decision, and I've helped guide them through that decision to sell the house, buy something new, or find something different, I find that the whole process actually turns into a very empowering process, because not only are you then forced to, yes, take everything down in the old house, but then you put everything up in the new house.
Everything that you want up in the new house.
Exactly. Everything you want in the new house. And I remember one client, all the kids, I think it was 3 kids, they were all away to college already, but they had such a great time because she was able to at least afford a house that she could still have a bedroom for each child. And one of her favorite discussions that she told me about was paint colors.
Mm-hmm.
Because the kids could all choose now in their much older state. Okay, yeah, Ma, I don't need the pretty pink. Yeah, exactly. I want this nice red or this vibrant green. And it was great because it's like now you're creating new memories and new moments of joy after such a tumultuous time in divorce and separation with your kids.
That's right.
And that whole process of being in a new home, creating new memories. And I tell people, if you're moving out and you're going to miss the house, take pictures.
Mm-hmm.
The memories will always stay with you. It's not the house that gives you those memories. It's you.
That's right.
That has the memories.
That's right.
Right.
Yeah, that's exactly
So.
right. Yeah, it's the whole process is so hard, and I think prospective clients need to hear that we know that.
Yeah.
You know, and they need to hear that we'll help you get where you need to go. You know, there's budgets you can do if you've never done a budget, we can get you set up with someone who can. We can help you. I don't even like to call it budgets because it seems like a hard word, but you know, cash flow analysis, if you will. You know, but we can look at all of that. You know, we can send you, you know, once we have a general idea of what money is there versus isn't there, what's liquid money, you know, cash in the bank versus non-liquid tied up in a retirement account, we can get you set up with the financial person that can walk you through what this income stream might look like for you at various rates of return to give you that comfort that, okay, this is what I need to do in order to be on my own and be financially independent. Or, oh gosh, I didn't realize I had this money and I didn't realize I was going to get this. I'm going to be okay.
Yeah.
Which is what we want, right?
Yeah.
So we're connected, and we can get you set up with people that can help you. If we can. You know, some of the work is outside of our wheelhouse.
Yeah, we definitely have those connections, that network. And as you were saying that, I was just thinking about the conversation I have with a lot of clients, especially if they have like a low interest rate on their mortgage, and they're like, "Well, I can't let the house go because I want to keep this low interest rate." I get it. Go one step further, then we start looking at the equity in the house. I'm like, you have plenty of equity in the house. You could possibly, again, smaller house. Probably because you are separating and maybe the kids are already out of the house or they're older. But you could probably either make a substantial down payment with the equity in that former marital residence once it's sold on your new house, or maybe even pay it in full. And lo and behold, what a wonderful world would that be if you didn't even have a mortgage payment and you don't even have to worry about interest rates.
Right.
And I have plenty of clients who are like, oh, yeah, that's not possible, until we actually go through the numbers.
Mm-hmm.
And suddenly we're finding different creative ways that we can help people get from a relatively secure financial position because they're in a house with another person to a secure financial position on their own.
On their own. Yeah, that's glorious.
Yeah.
Love it. Yeah, the interest rates are crazy. You know, I can't predict what's going to happen, but I don't know that we'll ever see 2% again.
Yeah.
And so it makes it really, really difficult, and there are assumptions and then there are real assumptions of mortgages, and they're very different, and we can talk through that. But yeah, sometimes there's enough equity or enough retirement you can borrow against to make a down payment somewhere else and be totally fine.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. And I was actually reading an article relatively recently about the cost of weddings and the cost of divorces. And I don't think it's really changed, but the cost of divorce can substantially be more expensive than the cost of wedding. Granted, I did see someone's wedding registry recently, and it was really high in terms of different items. I was like, $200 for what? But anyway, I digress. And that's something to consider, because if you are going to separate and you are wanting that bulldog attorney, which we both have been for our clients, that comes at a cost. So would you rather pay an attorney in lieu of sending your kid to college? Would you rather pay your attorney in lieu of having more money for that down payment on that house? Right. And so these are all factors to weigh, because I'll be honest, I want to make a living, but I would rather help 100 clients through amicable divorce than have one client that's going to be throwing mud all day, every day.
That's right. Me too. And we talked about that a little bit earlier. Absolutely. Like, I need to pay my bills too, but if I can help you get where you need to be, and I can feel comfortable knowing that you were empowered to do what was necessary to go out on your own, I'm happy. I'm good. It's all good.
Yeah.
Yeah. You know, we're kind of recession proof.
Yeah.
You know, so our business is not going to go away.
Yeah.
So the more people we can help and empower, I think the better we all are.
That's a great point, and I think that's one project I want to reference for Modern Legal specifically is we really do want to reach any and everyone in the Carolinas that thinks they can't afford a family law attorney or won't be able to go through the full process with an attorney, because our target is to help as many people as possible.
Mm-hmm.
And in part, that is making sure we're not just throwing money at the problem or the situation of separation divorce, and rather saying, okay, you have this budget, you're in this socioeconomic status, you have these many kids or this marital estate. Let's use the funds you have available as efficiently as possible, including with attorney's fees, which does mean let's try to negotiate. Let's try to resolve a lot of things amicably.
Yep.
Because the more things we can resolve amicably, not only will a judge be happier, but everyone, including family members, children, any third parties looking in, will feel like you've had a better situation than their other friend who has been in protracted litigation for years.
Yeah. Holistically, it's so much better if you can resolve this stuff on your own, at least most of it.
Yeah.
Sometimes it won't work. Sometimes you can get half of it done. That's okay too.
Yeah.
But, as long as you're invested in the decision making, you'll feel better.
Yeah. Yeah.
Hands down.
Yeah.
Bet my salary on that.
Yeah, exactly. Same. And to anyone who's thinking about, Theresa and Deb, I know they're family law attorneys, but I want to go through the protracted litigation. I want my day in court. That's totally on you. That's fine. What I will add, though, is I have never seen someone happy, excited walking out of a courtroom.
Never. I have never, ever, ever, ever. I've been practicing over 20 years now. You're close to that.
Yeah.
I've never seen anybody happy walking out of a courtroom. And our judges will tell us that's their best day when people walk out miserable. I'm like, awesome.
Yeah, exactly. Because trust me, the judge hasn't lived with you. That's a reality. The judge probably hasn't met your children. That's a reality. The judge doesn't want to actually make these decisions, but is forced to because there is this form of relief, and judges are glad to do it. I'm not saying they don't like doing what they do for the most part, but on the flip side, because they're not a member of your family, they weren't a spouse in your marital relationship, they just won't know what your situation is better than you. They won't.
They will never know it better than you, ever.
And personally, I just don't want any stranger, even if they're a very smart,
and likable
judge, right?
Yeah. No,
I don't want them figuring out, when I can see my child or how I can spend my dollar that I've earned.
Right.
And so if you want more control over the situation,
yeah,
then sometimes finding that bulldog attorney may not be the best option.
That's exactly right. Find yourself a reasonable attorney that will work with you instead of just say, I'll just do whatever you want and we'll just go fight that in court.
Yeah.
There's your bulldog attorney.
Yeah.
Doesn't care either.
Yeah. Yeah. And they exist.
Yep.
I will say in Mecklenburg County, which is where our practice is primarily based, granted, we have cases throughout the states of North Carolina and South Carolina, we find that the general culture of family law attorneys is try to amicably resolve as much as possible, just because the laws, both in North and South Carolina, even though Tiffany's the one who's licensed at our team in South Carolina, are reflective that we live in the gray.
Right. Always.
And when people are like, well, what is the answer? Unfortunately, I have to say, I don't know.
It depends.
I've been doing this for well over a decade, and I still don't know. And it's because it depends. It's because there is no true black and white letter of the law. One of the only black and white things I can say is that, yes, you do have to be separated a year. That's pretty much it. Everything else, there's some type of gray component to it. And I think that's why divorce can seem daunting at times. On the flip side, if you sit down with an experienced family law attorney, then you can get the answers and strategies that your family needs to move forward.
That's exactly right. Yep. Such a good point.
Well, Deb, this has been an amazing conversation. I do hope the listener, as well as anyone they may know going through this process, has gathered a lot from this episode. And we hope to have you back again on the Legal Lounge.
Yes. Thank you so much for having me today. This was a lot of fun on this cold winter day.
Yes.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Appreciate it.
See you next time.
See ya. Take care.
Thank you for taking the time to listen to our discussion. To learn more about me and the Modern Legal team, go to our website, modernlegalnc.com, or check out the links in our show notes to follow us on Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, and YouTube. You can also call us at 704-286-6302. If you have been intrigued by the conversation and would like us to continue our discussions, please subscribe to the podcast and leave us a review. See you next time.